Welcome to Tuesday Talk. I'm so excited to be back. And Ntepi Jabari is sitting there not saying anything, and you know he's gonna be talking all night. Everybody that's going to join, going to learn something. There we go. We are live on Facebook. Yes. Come on in, family. Come on in. It's always a treat to learn about our history with Ntepi Jabari. It really is. It's always a treat. Come on in. Let's see who else is going to be joining us. Come on in. I'm excited for tonight's topic. I think this is something that we all need, some foundation in Kemetic history. And this kicks off our 4-part series on Kemetic history, the golden eras of Kemet. And this is going to be fun. This is going to be a lot of fun. Come on in, family. This is our first episode back in Tuesday Talk, and I'm excited for it. I missed everyone. I totally missed everyone. I hope that you missed Tuesday Talk so that you can be here and be excited to be here. Oh, there we go. We've got folks here. I see people. Hey, everybody. I see people from the Shrine of Ma'at, Ankh Ma'at. Welcome, welcome. Back in the house. I see a new name, Nika Hoskins. Welcome. Minnie Williams. Welcome. Brother Lavelle, peace. Question me. Hey, coming from Alabama with this knowledge. Welcome. I see Sanette Shankar. Welcome, welcome. Sanette Lisa Attaway. Good to have you here, sis. I see Priest Ames Ma'at Amen Ra is in the house.
I think we also have to acknowledge that we see Yasira Hotep coming in from Brazil.
I don't see him. Oh, there we are.
Yeah, on Facebook. Ankh Ma'at.
I was getting down there.
Family, all of the family.
I see the family. Where I was saying hi. I was going in order. I wasn't trying to ignore.
Oh, were you? He put it in. He was like, "Do you see that I am saying Hotep?" So
I didn't see you. You see her. You know I would have shouted you out before Jabari had I seen it. So I didn't see it. So welcome to everyone that is here tonight for Tuesday Talk. And with learning about our history the way that we do, which is basically finding a source that is reputable and consistent. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming looking and finding and getting a piece here and a piece there and a piece here, and then you got to put it together. So this episode tonight that we have for Tuesday Talk is part 1 of 4 parts that are going to be roughly a month apart. Okay, roughly a month apart. And the reason why we decided to do this is so that it can give you a foundation on Kemetic history. Okay. Now, whether you practice Kemetic spirituality, African spirituality, or whatever, it's still history. And it's still applicable for everyone to learn of all ethnicities, religions, spiritual practices, because this is what happened on earth, y'all. And we need to know. But it's important to understand that this is African history. This is what African people did. And a lot of this history is with African people doing this when there were no other people on the planet but African people. So let's be very clear who we're talking about. So before we dive on in, I'm going to start with a bio on Jabari Osaze. We know so much about him. We see him on Sonnetter. We see him in Ascension. We see him out in these streets. We know he went to Cornell. He gives tours. But every once in a while, we should really listen to his bio to see what it is that he's actually accomplished and what he has done. Okay. So Jabari Osaze has studied ancient Africa for over 30 years, focusing primarily on ancient Kemet, Egyptian history, and spirituality. Brother Jabari has led annual study tours to Egypt since 2002 in partnership with the African Genesis Institute. He has toured Egypt over 20 times. More than 3,000 people seeking to uncover the wisdom and accomplishments of ancient Africans have taken these epic journeys, including Abu Sashad. Okay. He has also led study tours to other areas in Africa, including Ethiopia and Ghana. His popular monthly historical museum tours have included the world-renowned Egyptian and African collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Brooklyn Museum, the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, and the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, and the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Brother Jabari obtained his Bachelor's of Science degree in Human Services and Africana Studies from the Cornell University and his Master's of Science degree from the Metropolitan College of New York. He recently completed his Master of Divinity in Interfaith Studies and Counseling at the University of Metaphysical Sciences and is currently a doctoral candidate at the institution as well. He currently serves as the co-chief priest of the Shrine of Ma'at, a rapidly growing Kemetic spiritual institution in Harlem, New York, baby. In 2006, he and his wife, Anika Daniels Osaze, co-founded the Center for the Restoration of Ma'at, an institution devoted to the application, of the ancient African ethical paradigm in our daily lives. He is the executive producer and co-host of a weekly television show that used to air called Kemetic Legacy Today. And the reruns still air and they're still awesome and people still watch them and learn from them. Okay. The Journal of Ancient Kemetic and Ancient African History and Spirituality. The consummate historian, priest, and certified life coach, Brother Osaze teaches a variety of courses on African history and lectures on a wide variety of historical and motivational topics. He has long focused on building connections between continental Africans and those of us of the diaspora. In December of 2021, Mr. Osaze was given the honor of being named a traditional chief in the city of Moray in the central region of Ghana. He is featured in several documentaries, including Hidden Colors 5, The Art of Black Warfare, Hapi, The Role of Economics in the Development of Civilization, The Pharaohs Unveiled, and Buckbreaking. Brother Jabari was named one of the most influential religious leaders in New York City by the New York Magazine. That's big time, you guys. He is the author of 7 Little White Lies, The Conspiracy to Destroy the Black Self-Image. He is also a proud resident of the village of Harlem, New York. Without further ado, I present to you Brother Ntepi Jabari Osaze. Round of applause.
Peace, 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 peace. It's wonderful to be with you. And I'm always excited to talk to the Tuesday Talk family.
And we're always happy to have you here because we know what's going to be on and popping, right? We're going to learn something.
We hope.
We know it. We're going to learn something. So Jabari, what do you have for us today?
We've talked about really delving into an important topic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
In many ways, one of the things that we ought to do is come to a better understanding of perhaps Africa's most important civilization, certainly one of the most influential civilizations in all of human history, ancient Kemet. And in doing that, one of the ways that we will better understand this great nation is by understanding it from, I'd like to say, the 30,000 foot view. What do I mean when I say that? We could literally talk about all of the nearly over 300 rulers of ancient Kemet. We could try to talk about Kemet year by year for over 3,000 years. We could try to take you to all of the museums that have artifacts that describe or attest to the greatness of ancient Kemet. We could do all of those things, but certainly one of the things that might occur is that you might not be able to understand the larger brushstrokes. Sometimes when you look at things in specific, it is difficult to understand the story in general. Mm-hmm. And the in general story is important. In fact, one of the things that I suggest that we do is we get to understand how this great civilization gave so much to the world, and we have to understand its African nature.
That's right.
There has been a lot said about who the people of ancient Kemet actually were. And I want to say to you, Abutsashat, that most of the misrepresentation today occurs in the popular media. That's where they do it now more than anywhere else.
Right.
Because some of the arguments that people of African descent have had around the people of ancient Kemet, the ethnic background of the people of ancient Kemet, I dare even say the racial background of the people of ancient Kemet, there's been a lot of work done in actually in academia. We've pushed back there long enough so that while there's still misrepresentations going on there, the most egregious misrepresentations occur in the popular media. And I'm going to say to you, there are going to be more people that go, for example, to see a summer blockbuster movie than will ever take an African history class. So the popular misrepresentations of Kemet are important.
They are important.
They are important because more people, many more people are party to it. One of the best ways, I argue, to understand the African nature of the people of Kemet is to look at its most important periods. This is critical. When you look at these 3,000 years, there are lots of large brushstrokes that appear. One of them is that Kemet has 4 critical eras. So let me see, perhaps we should start. In fact, before I even do that, can I do something that might be a little interesting? Let's do this for a second.
Oh God, what is it?
I want to show you, because sometimes what I do is I want us to understand exactly what kind of misrepresentation I'm referring to, right? And I think one of the best ways to do this
the most powerful
is to look at popular media, right? This is something I'm sure we won't get dinged on YouTube because it's a commercial. But take a look at this commercial that was put forward by Amazon, one of the largest companies in the world. In fact, up until his divorce, the owner and founder of Amazon was the richest person in the world. Let's take a look at the commercial that Amazon put forward that attempts to describe the ancient Kemetic people. Take a look. I'm going to share this if I can. Let's see. Here we go. Take a look.
Cleopatra was the most powerful woman in Egypt. But no one likes a diva, hun. Watching Prime Video, she realised rulers could give back. So she ordered some gifts with Prime. After that, it was more of a one team, one dream kind of vibe. Couldn't give up all the gold, though. Prime chose everything.
I think that's a really interesting commercial.
I remember that commercial, Jabari.
Yeah, I mean, it's very recent. I mean, I believe that it was probably still playing this year. So I think that part of what is happening here is this is actually a response to our movement, Abu. Mm-hmm. Because there was a point where depictions of the ancient Kemetic people were actually populated by folks like, I'm going to take it back and show my age, Theda Bara.
Who?
And Elizabeth Taylor, right?
I remember.
Those are quotes that they use to depict the ancient Kemetic people.
Just straight up white folks.
You know, and now what you see is they are attempting to depict the ancient Kemetic people as being ethnically, and I dare use the word in quotes, racially similar to the people that live there now. And I want to say the reason why they do that is because so many people pushed back on this, you know, image of the Kemetic people being Europeans to the point where it fell apart. So they've gotten to what I would argue is a fallback position. The ancient Kemetic people must be the same people as the people that live there now. That's the fallback position.
Right.
But it's still not enough. We know when the people who we would consider Arabic got to the region. If you know history, you know that most of them got there in 637, some say 632, of the Common Era. And in fact, usually when people try to say that the people of ancient Kemet are the same people ethnically and racially as they are now, all you have to do is ask them if they're familiar with what is called the Arab invasion of Egypt. This is a historical footnote. But because they think that you have no knowledge of history, they try to flim-flam you. They try to hoodwink you. They try to lead you astray. And so what we must do is understand the history. And as we understand the history, our arguments will be irrefutable.
That's right.
So one of the things that we are going to do in this 4-part lecture is we're going to talk about the 4 critical eras. The 4 critical eras. Let me show you what we mean when we say the 4 critical eras. There were 4 periods that are of critical importance in Kemetic history. These are the periods that in many ways give us an excellent understanding of the nature of Kemet and of how Kemet was peopled, assembled, and who are the people that maintained it. So here are the eras. The first one is the one that has that uniter. We're going to see this image again because I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. But I want you to know that the first critical era must be Kemet's uniting. This is the era we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about King Narmer, also known as King Menes. He is the person that puts Kemet together. And so that is what we will discuss tonight. But I also want you to understand the 2 other eras. After Kemet has a great fall at the end of what modern historians call the Old Kingdom, a series of rulers work diligently to put Kemet back together. The final of those rulers, perhaps the most important of those rulers, is King Mentuhotep, a man that is always depicted with the darkest possible skin. In fact, so are his queens. I'm going to even show you how the Metropolitan Museum tries to deal with the fact that his queens have the darkest skin and the tightest curled hair. And so he is the person that completes the reunification of Kemet, and now modern historians call the period beginning with his rule and actually advancing through several subsequent rulers. That period is known as the Middle Kingdom. But Kemet falls apart again. And during this period where it falls apart, now we see foreign people take control of Kemet. That is the controversial era, the most controversial period. When we get to that part of Butsashat, it's going to be hot in the city. Because those foreign people are generally considered to be the Hebrew people.
Oh, yeah, it's going to burn.
The story that they have been telling the world is not the one that can be corroborated by archaeological evidence, by outside sources, and even by a logical understanding of the points that are even described in the biblical narrative. So we're going to also talk about that period, and that period is finally led by a man named King Amos. You see him as the third person on the screen. He is the first king of what is then going to be called by modern historians as the New Kingdom. That is King Amos. In fact, this statue is likely him as a prince, a younger man. By the way, I got a chance to see this statue myself with my own eyes at the Louvre this year. Powerful. And then Kemet has another period where it struggles. And then finally, we see perhaps what could be considered the final golden era, the final critical era, the final powerful period in Kemetic history, when we see those rulers that we sometimes call the Nubians, but should probably better call the Kushites, come forward and put Kemet back into its powerful form. And so these are the four eras that we're going to be addressing in each of these discussions. I'm really hoping that as we have this discussion, it will become absolutely clear who, how, and when Kemet comes into its primacy. And so I really do believe that the conversations can be very interesting, and hopefully we'll also get some discussion from the rest of you. You'll have questions that you want to ask. By the way, I as I've been talking and as you were talking about Sashat, I was looking at some of the folks who were greeting us, and there are just too many people for me to name.
Right, there are a lot.
Many shrine members, many shrine members. Can I say Ankh and Ma'at to you all? Folks who I have interacted with on Sonnetter, can I say Ankh and Ma'at and peace to you all? It is wonderful to see that you're all here. And I really hope that we'll begin to have a broader conversation. And perhaps at the end, we'll open it up a little bit so folks can also ask questions.
So Jabari, Abu Amas had a question before you go into the dynasties. Can you help define the Kemetic civilization about the people in pre-dynastic, before pre-dynastic, and unification, if you're able to do that?
Yeah, I think that there is more for us to learn in terms of the archaeology and study, right? So I don't want to give you I don't want to tell you that we actually have settled scholarship entirely on who these people are. But I will say to you that we have to understand that the people who were actually entering into this particular region of the Hapi Valley, the Nile Valley region, were, let's be clear, Africans who were coming from the south.
Let's be clear.
We're going to express much of that today and continue to talk about that as we move forward. Clearly, we're talking about Africans from the south, who are the people that particularly put Kemet together. And here's something that I think is interesting, Abu. In some ways, when we say the Kemetic people, in some ways that's an anachronism. I think it should probably be better understood that those Africans from a variety of groups that existed in the area around the Hapi Valley region were the ones that had an alliance. More on that in a minute. So even there, they may not have been entirely people of the same ethnicity. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that they weren't Black folk.
Right.
I'm saying that there were different groups of Black folk.
I want to jump in and say this.
Sure.
Sometimes people conflate race and ethnicity.
Yes.
Okay. Ethnicity, like technically, and I don't hate anything. I really don't, because it ages you and puts wrinkles on your face. But I hate dividing up African people. I hate it. I don't do it. I really don't. So, but to give you an example of what ethnicity is, it's just really like where you were born and your like microculture. So technically, Jabari and I are different ethnicities. Do you
Hmm.
see how ridiculous that is? We both
Yeah,
black folks. We both black.
yeah.
Okay. So ethnicity is just like your language, the region, what you do culturally, the food, how you cook it, whatever. What I have found, and then I'm gonna get a mic back to you, when you talk to Pan-African Black people of the diaspora, especially those of us displaced through enslavement, we say and do a lot of things that are similar. We have a lot of similar expressions. I spoke with an elder Afro-Latina Cuban woman years ago at Bikram Yoga, and they have an equivalent Black don't crack expression amongst Black Cubans.
Hmm.
And she was straight from Cuba. So that's what ethnicity is. Ethnicity is not a different race like European, Asian, African. It's just within a race. Y'all are from different places and y'all do things a little different, but that's what it is. In case you don't
Yeah, I think that we should recognize that the funny part of this, the part that I think that we have to also acknowledge, is that much of the perspective of the ancient world really revolved primarily around ethnicity.
Okay.
So that's why some of these issues become a little bit difficult when we come to the modern world. But there's something else disingenuous that happens, Aboot, that I think we need to also mention.
Okay.
Now, it was really people of European descent that created the concept of race, right? They created the concept of race. People understood national difference and cultural difference, but the idea that there were Black people, for example, that there were white people in opposition, is something that primarily Europeans created in order to exploit the world.
Right.
So they were very clear on who was Black and very clear on who was white, because they wanted to say that those people who were Black were those people who were primitive, those people who were not human. Fast forward to our current period, when we're able to actually prove that some of the world's most influential people were people who were Black, now they no longer want us to talk about Blackness. Now they want to say, oh, Kemet was a multi-ethnic society. And in fact, the origins of that argument that puts all of the things that they created in our social discussion on its head started when what they started to say about ancient Kemet is, well, understand that there were white people of varying physical type. And they were trying their best to say that even people with dark skin and tightly curled hair could be European, could be white. So I want you to understand that this line is one that was created by Europeans, and they have erased its boundaries when it suits them. But today, what we're going to do is we want to be clear about where those people who gave the world its greatest civilization came from. We should at least say that they are Africans. So let's begin with another image of this person. And I show this image very often. Here is the fragmentary statue, of Narmer. And I want us to understand that when you look at Narmer, what you are seeing is a person that comes from further into the interior of Africa, to put this great civilization that we know as Kemet in order on the coast of Africa. And I constantly show this image, Aboot, because I want to say to you that it is so amazing to me that so few people have seen it. You might say, well, Jabari, why have so few people seen it? I have to say to you that I believe the reason why we have not seen this image is because it displays an African.
Period. Period.
Because his nose is not just wide, but it's a wide nose by African standards. You hear what I'm saying? This is a wide nose by African standards.
I mean, he looks like Mike Tyson.
I mean, Mike Tyson's nose is not even that wide.
I mean, it's not, but the brother looked like Mike Tyson.
Yes, well, similar. Yes, you could say that this is Mike, right? I mean, I just want to say to you that when you look at these individuals, it should be clear who we're referring to. Now, keep in mind, this is a piece of stone. There's no color on this.
Right.
But even looking at his features, we know who we're seeing. And I'm going to say to you, Aboot, that at any given hour of the day, with the 18 kajillion cable channels that we now have, you're going to find documentaries on Kemet. I'm going to use this word advisedly, on Egypt, and they will be on at any given hour of the day. Any given hour of the day. They're extremely popular. And virtually all of them will begin to talk about the person that put together Kemet. They may even mention his name, but you know what they never show you? They never show you his face. They never show you his face. How could we not say that this is something that we should consider intentional? How could we say that in good conscience? If you were watching a documentary on the beginnings of the United States and they didn't show you a painting of George Washington, you might find that a little puzzling. But this is routinely what they do when we talk about ancient Kemet. So I want us to once again be aware of the image of this man, understand who he is, understand who we're talking about when we talk about those individuals who put ancient Kemet together, so that we're able to inoculate ourselves against the European propaganda that to represent him as someone else. That is what we often see. Now, it shouldn't be surprising. It should not be surprising that when we're talking about Namr, we're talking about someone that is coming from further in the why are you both Greeks though? Greeks were the moral enemy who conquered our ancestors. Black Frat and Soros are Greeks. I haven't answered all the things I see on the screen, but I want to be clear. I'm not a Greek. I am a member of a Black Greek letter organization, right? But I've never called myself a Greek. I'm an African. And I want you to understand, I'm going to take a quick departure and answer this question, Abu. I want to just simply say to you so clearly that when you are a student in colleges in the United States, the fraternity and sorority groupings are not unimportant. And as a Black Cornellian, you should also understand that some of what happened around the creation of those organizations are some of the ways that Black folks got together to support themselves. Do I think that they should have Greek letters? I'm going to say to you very clearly, I do not think they should. Initially, the founders of Alpha Phi Alpha wanted to use what they called Ethiopic letters. But in the period that it was founded, they had no access to the language. So they used what they had access to. I truly believe that it's past time for us to now, as we have access to those letters, to change the letters. And so that's the situation that I think we should be in. But sure, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
And I'm going to say to you that there's nothing Greek about Alpha Phi Alpha other than the letters. Everything else is African, and you'd have to be a member to know that. And so that's the situation that we're in. And so you can have your disagreements on it. That's fine. That's fine. But I'm going to say to you as a member of the organization that the organization I belong to has always been connected to Africa. We're talking about folks like W.E.B. Du Bois. We're talking about folks like Martin Luther King. We're talking about modern individuals like Tony Browder, like Jabari Osaze, like Asar Imhotep, like Dr. Charles Finch. The list of people who are connected to Africa and have their eyes set on Africa goes on and on and on and on. So that's what I want to say to you.
I have one quick question for DL. In which sorority do I belong? Go ahead and drop that in the chat.
Yeah, I don't know why I said why we're both Greeks, because I think
no. Let him answer the question in the chat. Go ahead, Jabari. You can finish.
Yeah, I think that that's a little bit strange. So that's how it is. So let's continue. Right. What I want to do is I want to talk to you, and let me say before I even continue, these are good conversations. I want you to have access to us so we can talk about these things and come to a better understanding of them, right? I'm going to say to you that while I think that it's not unfair to critique these organizations for using Greek letter, I think that's a fair critique, right? I want you to understand that the person that you're insulting is someone who has spent his entire adult life, in fact, probably even a little bit more than my adult life, doing everything I can to promulgate African history, to reconnect Africans on the continent, to do all of those things. And if that's the one thing you can critique me on, then that's fine. I'm okay with that because I'm someone who has spent there isn't a day of my life that I don't spend trying to make the ancestors proud. And I think that if you're familiar with me, while you might disagree with me on this point, you'd probably agree with me on that. So let's move. Let's talk about how Kemet becomes Kemet, right? Let's begin with this. I want us, before we even talk a bit about Narmer, I want to put it in perspective by showing you this item. And I am not going to tell people what its name is. I'm going to ask if the folks that are looking can tell me what it's called. Let's see what it's called. Does anyone know what this item is called? And for extra credit, tell me where it is. That's the extra credit. Tell me where it is. Now, one of the reasons why I think we ought to know what this is because it is one of the artifacts that helps us understand, truly helps us understand, how Kemet comes from the interior of Africa. I see one person, Wusir Heru Ma'at, actually answering the question. I see someone else that says it's the Nubian incense. I think you mean the Nubian incense burner. I want to see what else, if there are other answers. Sister Sandra, Sinette Sandra says the coastal incense burner. She trying. Is there anyone else? Just 2 answers? 3 answers? Come on now.
Come on, you guys.
Are you not answering because you think the answer has already been given? Or are you not answering because you don't know what it is? Sandra says, I can't spell. Listen, I'm going to tell you, if there wasn't spell check, I never would have gone to college, because they would have looked at my application and said, oh, no, send this person back to 3rd grade. So I'm not known for spelling either. So
they didn't have spell check back then. They didn't have spell check back then.
They did have spell check. They did. It was a little bit harder to use than it is now. Yes. Okay. And yes, did you just call me old? I think you just called me old.
I mean, I'm just saying, you used the reference I ain't know earlier. So I'm saying.
So let me say that several of you do have the answer correct. And I know that Sinette Sandra actually also tried to sound it out because she might not have known the spelling, but this is known as the coastal incense burner. The coastal incense burner. And I want you to know that Sinette Sakina Ra is probably the only one that said where it was. Remember I said that you needed extra credit? She's the only person that gets extra credit. This is at the Oriental Institute in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important? Why am I showing this? Here goes the actual included description of the Coastal Incense Burner that is at the Chicago Oriental Institute. I want you to look at this. And one of the things that we begin to understand is that while this item was actually put together and found at a time before Namur unifies Kemet, we can clearly see that it has the imagery that becomes actually common throughout Kemet. And it is believed, as it is found, that it is found in an area that would be considered Nubia today, all the way south. All the way south. So you can even see, if you look here, that we see a ruler sitting on a chair. This is believed to be someone that is wearing the white crown. And in front of that person, we see the falcon. These are the images. These are the images that tell us that the civilization of Kemet comes from the south. Not from Europe, not from Asia, not from somewhere else that they've tried to argue it comes from, but that it comes from Kemet, because this item is before the rulers actually put Kemet together.
This is pre-dynastic,
all the way south. It's
right.
Pre-dynastic is one of the words that we would use. It was found at around, in a period where they believe that it is at around 35 or 3300 BCE. So it's about 100 to 200 years before the unification of Kemet. And it's called the Coastal Incense Burner because it was found at a site that has the modern name of Coastal. Okay, that's not an ancient name, but that's a description of where it is. Okay, if you are anywhere near Chicago, you should go to the Oriental Institute to take a look at it. I think it's interesting that one of the most important artifacts of ancient Kemet, in fact, of ancient Kush and Kemet, is not on the continent of Africa. It's not in Africa. It's in Chicago. At the very least, go see it.
Right.
At the very least, go see it. Because we could talk for an hour about the contradiction of that. We're not going to spend time doing that. But I do want you to recognize that this displays that the civilization comes from the south. In addition to that, you're going to see the pottery of the folks in Kemet right before and immediately after the unification of Kemet look very similar to the pottery that comes from further south. Now, you might say, what does that mean, Jabari? Once again, it means that there's great influence. There's great influence culturally from the people that come further south. So I think we need to understand that when our ancestor scholar, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, says that Ethiopia is the mother of Kemet, this is what he's referring to. He's really talking about Kush. He's really talking about those people that we call the Nubians today. It seems that this civilization, these people come from the south, and as they move further onto the coast of Northeast Africa, that is when this culture actually flourishes. I don't think that most people would argue that Kush was ever really more powerful than Kemet. Maybe aside from a very short period of time during the Kemetic period. But I will say that those civilizations, those ideas that came from Kush, came into great flourishing on the coast of Northeast Africa. Okay, let's continue.
Jabari.
Yes, please.
Yasser Hotep said that he'll be leading tours of the Oriental Institute soon because Yasser lives in Chicago. So
yes, he does. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. I didn't see that. He really does need to do that. And I want you to know that whenever we are able to go, we go. And it's powerful. It's a powerful space. It's a powerful space. Now, I'm going to say to you, It is in an institute where I'm going to say to you, those folks really did not want to articulate that Africa gave civilization to the world. But the artifacts tell the story. That's why you have to know the artifacts. That's why you should understand that the artifacts refute the anti-African European propaganda. When you know the artifacts and their greatest usage, now we can actually more powerfully push back against these issues. So take a look. Let's talk a little bit about Narmer. Because remember, we're talking about the first period, right? We're talking about the first period. By the way, you should know that these topics are discussed in great length in my book, 7 Little White Lies, A Conspiracy to Destroy the Black Self-Image. And some of these slides come directly from the college level course that I teach on the history of ancient Kemet. So if you want to know more about this, I'll direct you to several books that will help. And you can also take the course that I offer as well. Okay, so you are looking here at a close-up of the face of Narmer. What do we know about Narmer? It's believed that he comes from the ancient city of Nekhen. The Greeks then later called this city Hierakonpolis, which really is supposed to mean something like the city of the falcon. The city of the falcon. And it seems like he comes forward at around 3100 or 3200 BCE, before the Common Era, to defeat the people that were in the north, all the way on the coast, to unify and to create this nation. Some of the major discoveries around Narmer were done by J.E. Quibble in 1897 to 1898. That's when they did so much of the archaeological excavations of the sites that have these artifacts, including this amazing artifact. By the way, as I continue, here's another question. Let's see who's going to have this answer. I've already told you that this is a fragmentary statue of Narmer. Where is this artifact? Currently, where will you see this artifact? Okay, let's continue and see if we have some clear answers. You have to understand that Narmer's reign and some of the imagery that he used probably set the standard for literally thousands of years. And that many rulers, in fact, we could really say all of the rulers of Kemet, continued to use his standard and some of the imagery that he uses. We'll talk more about that as we look at the historical document. And I want you to know that I think it's quite ironic that the world's first historical document, the oldest historical document in the world, is usually considered the Palette of Narmer. The Palette of Narmer. And it seems to argue that Narmer is the one that put Kemet together in the first place. Dynamite Reacher says, I thought Narmer did the reunification of Kemet. There's no good argument that Kemet was a unified nation before Narmer puts it into order. There's no good argument for that. We believe, and I'm talking about folks who have done the archaeological work and have been doing the historical study, that probably what happened is that there were groups of people who lived in the area that were doing things, and it is Narmer that put everything together. That's the argument that we make at current. Okay? Let's take a look at the item, the device that tells this story. Oh, and I see a bunch of answers. I think I see Sen Jason says the British Museum. Sen Angenicon says the Louvre. What else did I see? I think Luxor is what someone says. Someone else says the Louvre. Yeah, there are a few folks that are Cairo location. I'm going to say to you, one person has the correct answer.
Jabari, Texas Transparency just was like, where is it?
Yes. I saw that. And I think he did that because he or she, I don't know if that's, I think it's a he.
I think it's a
said that because they were trying to say, Jabari, do not forget to give us the answer to the question.
Possible. Yes.
And once again, Wusser Heru Ma'at has the correct answer. It is at the William Flinders Petrie Museum in London. Now, you might be confused and think it's at the British Museum. The British Museum is literally walking distance from the William Flinders Petrie Museum, but they're not the same institution. Okay? And the William Flinders Petrie Museum is an interesting place because this incredibly important artifact just sits on a shelf with some other stuff. It just sits there. And I went there to London to look at it, to see it. I'm going to tell you something so interesting. I walked right past it. I had to go back and ask where it was. And they were like, it's in this place over here. I was like, but I walked through there. They were like, yeah, it's there. It's on the shelf. I could not believe that this important artifact was simply just sitting on the shelf.
I mean, that's why it's just sitting on the shelf with no fanfare, because it is that important. I mean, there are also artifacts that prove the Africanness of ancient Egyptians, ancient Kemites, okay? And one is when they display the hair, because it's kinky and curly and knotty and all of the things that are that only an African person can have, can create, can reproduce, can pass on. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not surprised that it's just there. Like, it's over there. That's by design.
Yeah, I think that the museum is not really one that is, it has a lot of smaller pieces and they're kind of haphazard. I think that by now, if they recognize the importance of the piece, I'm being polite. Did you hear my polite intellectual shade? Sometimes I don't always need to be as subtle. If they understood the importance of the piece, they would have given it better, a more central focus. But of course they don't understand the importance of the piece, because everyone, all of the Western scholars for literally 200 years were trying to misrepresent who these people were. But this artifact has been on a shelf for nearly 100 years and no one is talking about it. So that's the travesty we have. But I want us to look now at the item that is the historical document. This is known as the Palette of Narmer. This is known as the Palette of Narmer. And astute folks in this discussion will tell us where it is. They'll tell us where it is. But I want you to recognize that you're not, first of all, just so I'm explaining it to you, understand that this is the same item. You're seeing both of the images are one side and the other side. Okay? So you're seeing two sides of the same item. It's called a palette because, as you may know, a palette is something that you use to mix pigments. And it's believed that this is likely a ceremonial item that was used to mix pigments, maybe for to be used on statues in a temple or at some other sacred space. But do you notice this circular area here? Maybe you can see my mouse moving. This is actually where it's believed the pigments would have been mixed. So this is why it is called a palette. Just like an artist painting palette, that's why it's called a palette. But what are we seeing? First, we're seeing a king with the white crown, this long bulbous crown, and he is holding the hair of someone who has kneeled before him, and he has essentially a stick with a rock on it. And you should be clear what he's about to do with him. He about to dispatch him. He about to hit this dude in the head. That's what we're seeing. And this historians then end up calling the smiting pose. The smiting pose. Yes, I see Suki Harrison saying he is smiting him. Yes, it's generally what historians call the smiting pose today. And we're going to see this same pose utilized for literally thousands of years on the continent of Africa. So we see him coming forward. We see him about to hit his enemy on actually he was on his knees. But one of the reasons why they say this is a historical document is that it's not just a document that's supposed to look interesting. It seems to tell us about an event that occurred. What are some of the things that tell us that there was an event? Let's zoom in a little bit, Abu. And I want you to see that the person that is kneeled here, by the way, it seems that we know his name. Do you see this item behind here? This might have a literal phonetic depiction of his name. I do not know what that name is. It looks like that is a knitting needle and perhaps a body, a pool. I don't know how we would speak this name. I don't know how we would speak these names. These glyphs are not glyphs that are used in the Kemetic language later. But I believe that this is an indication of this person's name. In addition to that, you'll see above this person's head an image that looks a lot like him, or at least looks like the people that represent him. And we see these things that look like flowers coming out of his back. These are meant to represent the papyrus plant. And the papyrus plant grows mostly in the north of the country. So they're saying that these people that Narmer was battling were further north. And each of these is meant to represent 1,000. So what do we think that this is saying? It seems like it's saying that the army that this person had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 people. And remember, Narmer comes from the city of the falcon, right? Mm-hmm. Nekin? Well, we can see that the falcon, Heru, is connected very closely to Narmer. Because the falcon is assisting Narmer in this battle. He literally has an adze, this is a woodworking device, in his nose. And I think it's also interesting that the falcon has what looks like a human hand here too. Interesting. In addition to that, we also see that one of the people that is important to Narmer is rendered behind him. He is his sandal bearer. Look at this. He's a sandal bearer. Deep. And once again, this is likely his name. Its speaking has been lost to history. But one of the reasons why we know this is likely his name is because we're going to see him again. And it has the same glyphs next to his head. Mm-hmm. They're trying to tell us who this is. So how do we know that it's Narmer? If we look at the top, we're going to see a depiction of Narmer's name. His name, in fact, I knew one elder that used to not call him Narmer. He would call him Catfish Chisel. His name is made up of a catfish. See the fish here on the top with the whiskers coming out here? And a chisel. Narmer. Narmer. Also sacred to Narmer is an image of the deity, the female deity that we see at the top. This is likely an early version of the deity that the Kemetic people would later call Het Heru. Sometimes historians say that when she's depicted this early, her name was better known as Bat. Bat is an early version of Het Heru. But can you see that it is a bovine or a cow form of a lady? We see this image used for thousands of years, and it is connected. It is connected to Het Heru. Beautiful image, by the way. And in fact, I'm going to say to you that even this year, when I think about the beauty of this image, I think about my journey, our group's journey to a magnificent place. That place is the temple that is consecrated to the great lady known as Hatshepsut. And when you go to Hatshepsut's temple and you look all the way on the side, you are going to see a portion of the temple that is consecrated to Het Heru. This to me is beautiful. And in that portion, you're going to see the same, virtually the same depiction of this great lady. So for thousands of years, I'm going to try to actually show you the image. For thousands of years, you will see this great lady represented in ancient Kemet. So let's take a look. Come on now.
Jabari, when you get a chance, can you answer Suki's question?
Yes, can you ask it? Because I'm not actually looking at the screen at this very moment.
It says, I think this is true as the person being killed looks more European. He's hairier. Also, is the image above him being embalmed? Did they use an implement like that to remove the brain when mummifying?
Now, let me say to you, that's a very interesting answer. That's a very interesting question.
Right.
It is believed that the Kemetic people used an implement to remove the brain. I don't think that we have any reason to believe that removing of the brain is what is occurring right now, right? But I am going to say to you that there are some that say that these people who were on the north of Africa might have been people who came into Africa. That they might not have been people who were native Africans. And there's some that make that argument. I don't know if we have enough information to say that definitively right now. So let me say to you, Suki, more scholars who are doing more work will be able to answer this question eventually, I believe. By the way, if you even look at Narmer's his clothing, can you see that he even has these forehead Heru decorative pieces there?
You can see it.
Yeah, I think you can. I think it's a wonderful image. And I want you to see, here goes the image. Let me show you this one quickly. Here goes the image of a pillar of Het Heru at the temple consecrated by Hatshepsut. I'm gonna say to you, this is literally over 1,000 years later, nearly 1,500 years later. We are seeing this image. And so when we see it on the palette of Narmer, know that the traditions of ancient Kemet, while they may seem very old now, I want you to know that these traditions lasted for thousands of years. And in fact, let's think of it this way. There were individuals who practiced ancient Kemetic spirituality for much longer than there are individuals who are practicing Christianity today. Think about that for a second. It's going to blow your mind.
Jabari, can you kind of expound on that? Someone asked, what was the religion of ancient Kemet? And Ames kind of mentioned, and these comments were a while ago, that it was, spirituality, like basically a part of the civilization and the way you live your life. Can you repeat what you said about how Kemetic spirituality was practiced longer, and also explain the difference between religion and spirituality?
That could be a whole other
I know, but just do
no
the icing.
I'm going to give those really tough questions sort of the kind of answers that they deserve, but I'm going to try to do it as quickly and as succinctly and as effectively as I can. First of all, let me say to you that we know that the spirituality of Kemet predates Kemet, right? Mm-hmm. Narmer, who is unifying Kemet, is already connected to Het Heru and to Heru. And the Kustal incense burner has images that we see connected to the deities of Kemet before Kemet. So obviously the spiritual traditions of Kemet are older than Kemet itself. And if Kemet lasts in its most powerful form for over 3,000 years, then you should understand that there's only one way that you can take this. This means that for over 3,000 years, Kemetic spirituality, and maybe we should call it Cushitic Kemetic spirituality, was prominent. This is longer than Christianity. So I want you to just put that in your brain and process it for a minute. That is how long these traditions lasted. Now, with regard to the difference between religion and spirituality, I think that, to be honest with you, the word religion was not meant to depict some of how it's been misused today. Religion comes from a Latin term that religare, which means to tie back, right? And I truly believe that the term was supposed to be the same as spirituality. But today what has happened is we can argue that religion are the dictates, the dogmas, the things that you think you ought to do for reasons just because someone said you should do them in many instances. And spirituality is the fundamental connection you have with the divine force, with all the people around you, and with the rest of the universe. So in many ways, religion is, or should be at least, a smaller circle, and spirituality should be a larger circle that encompasses religion. That's the way that I think you can definitely look at it. And finally, let me say to you, what is the spirituality of ancient Kemet? Now, in the ancient world, people didn't often give the names of spiritual forms. Like, they didn't say, this is what we call it. But if we had to describe Kemetic spirituality by a name, I have now begun to say that it should be called Wat Ma'at, the way of Ma'at. That the Kemetic spiritual form focuses on the application, the adherence, and the practice of divine balance. And so I would argue that Kemetic spirituality should be called Wat Ma'at, the way of Ma'at. And I think that if I had said that to a practitioner who lived in Kemet 4,000 years ago, they would agree. They would agree. So, and it probably is even more important to say that, Aboot, because the spiritual form predates what we would consider Kemet. So when we say spirituality, in some ways, it's an anachronism, right?
I agree.
It really should be something that describes the philosophy behind the spiritual form, and that is really the application of Ma'at.
So just real quick, when I was first coming into learning all of this, and it was just kind of overwhelming, and I spent a lot of time saying, what? The way that I my baby steps to understanding spirituality was the alignment of nature.
Mm-hmm.
From a Western perspective, we're taught that human beings dominates nature and that human beings are here. Human beings, where's the camera? Human beings are here and nature is here. And some of the dogma of religions back that up. You dominate this, you dominate that, XYZ. Spirituality, when I first started to really kind of take baby-sized bites to understand it, was understanding the alignment of nature and what nature is, and respect for nature, and where we are as human beings in alignment with nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that the divine is in nature, the divine is nature, the divine created nature.
Mm-hmm.
And how and so if you understand that you are a part of that, you are a part of that cycle while you're in the physical form on the earth. You're a part of that energetic and spiritual cycle when you transition and come back. When you transition and you're an ancestor and you come back, then because you have that understanding of alignment, because you have that understanding that you don't dominate nature and destroy it. You are a part of it, and that the divine is within you. It's in nature and it's everywhere. Then you start to treat things, you start to live your life differently because you recognize the divine within you. You recognize the divinity in a spider, so you don't want to kill it.
Yeah.
You recognize the divinity in soil that helps your plants grow, that helps your food grow. You recognize, you start to see everything differently. You appreciate the rain and the snow, and because you're understanding the divinity within all of that, and the fact
Yeah.
that you're a part of it, that helped kind of break open like my understanding of what was being said to me.
I think that's a powerful description of Butsashat. I think that's a really powerful description. I would add a little bit to it because in some ways, when we in the Western world hear nature, we think about the animals, the plants, the weather, the earth. But the reality is we are, this is really what you're saying. So it's not an opposition to what you've said. I just want to sit out a little bit more, that we are nature too.
That's right.
So to some degree, what it is, and this is the reason why I usually say the universe. Now that also has failings too, because when people hear universe, they think I'm just talking about stars and planets. I'm talking about everything, right?
Right, everything.
So spirituality is supposed to help you understand your place in the grand drama that is the world. Who are you in relation to the people around you?
Right.
Who are you in relation to the people that are no longer here in physical form, and those who are yet to be born? Who are you in relationship to the star? Who are you in relationship to a fish? That's what spirituality should teach you. And people who have not acquired higher spiritual consciousness, they see the world as only themselves.
Yep.
They are babies. You know how a baby just thinks about the fact that they're hungry and that they have discomfort, and they don't think about all the things that happen around them? Well, we cannot say that there's anything wrong with the baby. The baby hadn't been here that long. That's why the baby looks at that. But if you've been here 50, 60, 70 years and you still acting like a baby, something is wrong with you.
Something's wrong with you.
And that is what many of us are doing. We don't understand our connection to the rest of the grand drama. And that is what spirituality is supposed to help you understand. That's why the word religion, I argue, it actually means to tie back. Because you're tied to everything. Originally, the word religion didn't mean the dogmas and the stuff they tell you how to do for just the reasons because someone tell you to do it. That's really how it is today.
That's right. Yeah.
But when the term was originally crafted, I think they were thinking of the same thing that spirituality is. It's unfortunate that we've gotten to the place where people do things simply because they have been told to do it. And this is, in many ways, the difference between knowing and belief. Because I know, as I was part of another spiritual tradition, when I had questions about how I should be, often I was told that the fact that I had a question was a problem, that I should simply have faith.
Right.
I'm telling you that there's nothing in Wat Ma'at that says that. In fact, there's nothing in Wat Ma'at that says, if you say the wrong name, you're damned. There's nothing in Wat Ma'at that says if you actually don't worship this deity and you worship another deity, guess what? You're going to hell. Wat Ma'at is about how you are a good steward, a good actor in the drama of the universe. How do you behave to people around you? How do you see the rest of the universe and your application and use of the resources that have been given to you? That is Wat Ma'at. For example, one of the 42 laws of Ma'at Butsashat is not to waste water. You don't see that in other spiritual traditions. What? Your spiritual tradition says not to waste water? Some people will just think of the simplest way to explain that. They'll say, well, they grew up in the desert. I'm sorry. The rest of the spiritual traditions, many of them were in the desert too. But it is Wat Ma'at, is Kemetic Cushitic spirituality that says these are some resources that the universe has given you. How are you a good caretaker of them?
That's right. That's right.
So we are on a long but important tangent because I want you to understand that much of Kemetic spirituality, much of the Kemetic understanding of the world is based on your place in the universe. And I see a bunch of other questions. Obviously, I don't have there's no way that I can see them all or answer them all. Suki Harrison says, but it was not desert back then. I want you to understand that when Kemet comes into its most powerful stage, they live in the desert. It is true that there was a point that place where Kemet is was not desert. In fact, there you could even today you could go to modern Egypt, to that place that is misnomered Egypt, to Kemet, and you'll see large fossils of whales in the middle of the desert, because that space was not always desert. But when we're talking about these ideas coming into their most powerful form, it was a desert. It was desert at that time. Okay. There are a bunch of other questions. And I know that I saw one or two more that I wanted to answer and I didn't. Oh, I think Big Payback Pointer said, why is it that the person that has the hook in his nose looks like the person that's being smited? You might have come in a little bit late. I think that what they're saying is this is the leader of the group of people. In fact, we have what I believe is his name here, and this represents his army. So yes, I don't think it's by mistake that they look similar. Is it a description of their ethnicity? Maybe. Is it a description of their physical attributes? Maybe. But I will say to you that at the very least, these two people I think are meant to look alike, because this is the 6,000 person army of this person who was defeated. Okay, so let's continue. We've looked at the name of Narmer, which is at the top of the palette. We've looked at the deities that are sacred to him. We see an early version of Het Heru here. We see Het Heru on his belt. Did you notice that? Did you notice that there's Het Heru right on his outfit? If you didn't notice it, there's no shade. I'm not telling you off because you didn't notice it. But what am I saying? I'm saying that this is so important that you ought to go back and look at it at a granular level, because there are things that you can tell about this great story that you ought to use later. I'm not going to even talk to you about the bull's tail that's behind his leg. Don't even have time to talk about that. Don't even have time to talk about that. Let me mention this, though. I think that what we are seeing is these people down here are likely the compatriots of this ruler that was defeated. And it's possible that these are their names. But I think it's also possible, because if you look at this thing in front of the first person's face, I think that they're describing a fortress. More on that later. I think that they're saying part of this battle occurred in a city that had a fort. What is this? I don't know what this is. I honestly don't know what it is. But I'm telling you that one of the reasons why they say this is the world's first historical document is because it seems to actually have names, words, and it's telling what occurred. So the first part is Narmer having a battle with these people. The second part, let's zoom into the second part of it. The second part of the palette of Narmer is Narmer victorious. Narmer victorious. Here's Narmer again here. How do we know this is Narmer? Jabari, how do you know? He's wearing a different crown, because look in front of his face.
Yeah, right.
It's the same glyphs as the top. His name is Narmer. This is Narmer.
This is it.
And he's wearing a different crown. Why? Because now that he's gone to the north and defeated those people, he has 2 crowns. In fact, that is why for the rest of the time that Kemet is a great nation, they often call it the 2 lands. Because Narmer is the one that put it together. By the way, did you notice that his sandal bearer with the same glyphs in front of his face is here? Did you notice that? I think this is his name. By the way, I think it's quite interesting that the sandal is so important here. I think this is quite interesting. Why is it interesting, Jabari? You might ask. I think that as we look at African culture, the symbols of authority, even in West Africa, the symbols of authority are often the sandal. Let me give you an example that will take literally 10 seconds, less than 10. When you heard my bio, you heard that I am now an installed chief in a village, in a city in West Africa, in Ghana. Well, one of the things that is the symbol of the chief are his sandals or her sandals. Anika has some sandals that are fancier than mine, y'all. So when I say his, I don't just mean a male. I'm talking about the sandals of the chief. These are called a hanema. And so when you actually take that important title, that important role, you should understand that some of these images, I think, display cultural contiguity with the rest of the continent of Africa.
That's right.
That just as we see the sandal being important throughout Africa today, we're seeing that the sandal was important in ancient Africa amongst the Kemetic people. Now, let me say to you that that comment should not be surprising, Aboot. The only reason why it might be surprising is because people have spent so much time trying to say that these Kemetic people and those people we call Africans today ain't the same people. That's the problem we have.
It's so absurd.
By the way, let's go further. Let's go further. It seems that when Narmer is successful, one of maybe his generals, at least one of the people that is most important to him, is this person. And his name is made up of the tether rope and the T symbol. We know that this says something like Chet. That he actually does have a name that we can pronounce. And I think it's really interesting, Aboot. Look at him for a second. Anything unusual about him? How about unusual about what he's wearing? I think in many ways, we should recognize that he is struggling to wear his clothes. Do you see how he's holding it? You might say, well, this is a powerful nation. Why in the world would he be struggling to wear his clothes? Well, perhaps the garment that he's wearing, that he has wrapped around him, has importance. And it's difficult for him to wear it, but maybe some of the difficulty around wearing it is the darn point. Let me show you something for a second. And I shouldn't have to, because I know that so many of you are familiar with this already. But as you look at this, you should actually see some of, I know in West Africa again, I'm back in West Africa, Aboot. I'm back in West Africa. You are going to see once again that that folks of authority actually wear this challenging cloth. In West Africa, it is called the Ntama. I told you that Anika and I were installed chiefs in Ghana. Well, we're wearing a cloth that's tied around us, by the way, as well. And that cloth is also tied over our our left shoulder. That cloth is also tied over our left shoulder. That cloth is also tied over our left shoulder. There is cultural contiguity in the continent of Africa. So we don't know exactly what this man's role was, but we do know that he was important to Narmer. And I'm going to say to you something else interesting. This is another thing that we should be clear about. Narmer had to do battle with the folks in the north. And this battle might have been brutal. I can't tell you whether they actually beheaded their enemies, but I know at the very least what we are seeing is leopard print. You are going to. Yes, big pack pointer. I was going to talk about the leopard print, but I'm not even going there because it would take me to another hours. Yes, I was going to talk about the leopard print, but I decided that it would take too much time, and I've taken so much time doing this already. But so I want you to notice that you can see that the folks that are here are the people that he did battle with. And they have their heads between their legs. Looks like they've been decapitated. This was a battle. This was a battle. And it looks like the falcon, maybe this is actually a depiction of Narmer, assisted in this battle. This battle, by the way, also took place on the waters. You see, there's even a boat here. And the people who worked with Narmer were people of different regions. How do we know that? Look at these people. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you notice that they're carrying these poles and their images on the top? We consider these standards. What does that mean? It means that those people represent different regions. Kemet is the unification of different groups of people who lived in the Happy Nile Valley region.
That's right.
And these people were with Narmer. Look at that. By the way, today you would even see people, for example, in different states of the United States. Every state has their own flag, right? You
and
see
mascot.
When you go to the capital of the United States, you're going to see the different flags of the states. That concept comes from ancient Africa. Every state, as I think I heard a Boots Shot saying, every state has its own animal, its own flower. This is an ancient African behavior. You already saw the papyrus and the lotus, and you're even seeing these animals are sacred to those places.
That's right.
This is powerful to me. By the way, I always look at this in the back and say, what is this supposed to depict? There's some that say maybe this is a placenta. Wherever this person comes from, they are represented by the placenta. Powerful. We could talk more about those places and have more conjecture. We ain't got no time. Let's continue. And yes, Sinette Cortia, just like a flag. Just like flags represent places, even in the United States, every state has its own flag. In Kemet, Kemet was made up of 42 states. They were called sepats in that time.
Can y'all see my flag?
Had a flag. Each of them had a symbol of an animal or something else that represented that place. This is a Kemetic concept. And when you went to the capital, you would see representations of them all. Anyway, let's continue. Below here, I think we are seeing images of the people that work with Narmer. And I think what they're doing here is they're putting these two lionesses in order. And that's a difficult thing to do. I think this is a symbolic representation. This is a symbolic representation. And I think that this is important. I think this is important. Let's go further down. Now, I told you that Narmer, we didn't talk about it extensively, but Narmer also had a bull's tail on him. He's also depicted as a bull. Well, doesn't this person here look a lot like the people that were defeated? They do tend to be represented the same way. It seems to me that whatever happened in this battle, they're also telling you there was a walled city that Narmer destroyed in order to complete the unification of Kemet. That there was a walled city that was part of this battle. Can you see the wall here? These look like the pieces of the wall. Family, this is known as the Palette of Narmer. It comes to us from about 3200 BCE, and it is considered the world's first historical document. A document that was put together by a group of people, by I dare use the word race again, of people who have been told they have no history, yet the world's first historical document is theirs. You're seeing writing here before you see European writing. You're seeing writing here before you see Asian writing. This is important. That your ancestors gave civilization to the world. And I want you to remember that as we're having this conversation, we are talking about how, in many ways, we should understand how Africans actually did so much and gave so much to the world. So let's say a few more things about Narmer and the things that we know about him. Here's a depiction of the Narmer palette. Here's the line drawing of the Narmer palette. And I want you to know that we know who his father was, by the way. It's believed that Narmer's father's name was Scorpion. Narmer's father's name was Scorpion. And Scorpion, we see him depicted with the white crown. So maybe Narmer got the crown, the white crown, by birth. Here goes the Scorpion's mace head. This likely belonged to Narmer's father. Now, I'm not going to go into this extensively, because if you really want to hear more about it, take the course, right? But definitely what I'm saying to you is we should understand that Narmer is already the king of a powerful nation. That all of these things occurred, telling us that the people that lived in that area were already, excuse me, part of a powerful, high-tech nation. Long before Narmer actually does this. But it is when Narmer puts Kemet together that it absolutely goes to its greatest heights. And that is something we ought to know. By the way, the Scorpion's mace head, I think I saw someone say, where was it found? I believe it was also found in the city of Nekhen, by the way, which is where they believe the city to be found. By the way, when you look at the Scorpion, look at the line drawing. Can you see that there are these birds were sacrificed, and you see standards again? You see these poles with an animal on it? They're representing places that Scorpion had power in. And Scorpion even seems to be cutting what looks to be an irrigation lane. And this seems to be almost like a ribbon cutting. All of this is occurring in such an early period that we must understand that these Africans were wielding the powers of state, militaries, treasuries, departments of agriculture and building and architecture long before we even see other nations organized into states.
That's right. That's right.
This is powerful. And I want us to really understand what it means for Africa. So, what else do we know about Narmer? We should also know that it is believed today that his mother's name was Shesh. Shesh was probably his wife. I mean, his mother. And it even seems that he has some other family members that come to reign as well. We often also, there's a long argument as to whether Narmer and Menes were the same people, or whether Narmer and Hor-Aha were the same people. But as we look at some of the kings lists that have been recently found, we now believe that Narmer had more than one name, that Narmer and Menes or Mena were the same people, right? Keep in mind that later in Kemetic history, every ruler would have had 5 names. And so we believe that Narmer had at least 2.
Now that's black, y'all, to have a whole bunch of names. And one of the names only his mama knew. Come on. Who does
yeah,
that?
and I'm going to tell you that recently we see Narmer's name on several ostraka. Ostraka are pottery shards, and they have his name and also the glyph Min next to it, which is where we get Menes from. So this is why we argue today that he is both known as Narmer and Menes or Mena. One of those pot shards come from a wine jug. Where was it found? In Nala Tila, a site in southern Israel that has the 5 royal names, including Min. Israel, Jabari? Yes. For most of Kemetic history, the Kemetic people had control of that area that we would consider Israel today. They had control of that area. Narmer's wife is likely a lady known as Neithotep. Neithotep. And she has her name on several artifacts. It is believed that she and Narmer give birth to the next ruler, the man named Hor-Aha. This is important. I'm not going to go into that ruler now. So understand that as we see this, we've taken a deep dive into one of these great periods. We're talking about how Kemet becomes Kemet. We're talking about how this man, the man with the most African features, puts together the nation that is the most influential nation in the world. And in fact, as we continue to tell this story, you are going to see that when Kemet does something important, it is irrefutable that those people who we would consider Black Africans today are the ones that do it. In fact, usually for Kemet to go into a period of prosperity after a period of challenge, rulers from the interior have to come forward to do it. And that is what we see with Narmer. That is what we see with Mentuhotep at the beginning of the 11th dynasty. That is what we see with Amos at the beginning of the 18th dynasty. And that is what we see with Shabaka and Pa in the 25th dynasty. That these 4 critical eras show us that the nature of Kemet was African. That it is Africans who peopled, who established, and who maintained this great nation. And so I truly hope that you will return for the remaining 3 discussions as we talk about each of the other periods, because I'm excited to talk about them. And I hope that you're excited to hear more about them as well.
I dropped the link in the chat. And if someone wants to get on and ask a question, click on the link and we'll see what's going on.
So we'll actually have a moment where you can talk to us. You can come in. But of course, when you come in, we're going to see you in the background first. Please make sure you have your camera on, that we can see your name, because also when we are so liberal and allow people to come into channels, occasionally we get not us, but occasionally people get photo bombed and all kinds of other crazy things happen. So please, if you're going to come in and ask a question, make sure we can see your face on camera. Make sure that we can tell that you're really someone that's coming to ask a genuine question. And with that, we'll actually let you in.
We'll let you out.
So if you have questions, comments, things you want to ask about this or even something else, this is a good time to do it.
Yeah, feel free. There were some questions that people had, and we couldn't necessarily get to them. So I see some. Ooh, he came on. So yeah, so this is an opportunity for you to come on and ask some questions.
Just click the link. You'll see the StreamYard link.
Yep, the link is there.
You'll be able to come in.
Let me know if you can see the link, guys. I'll put it in there again.
I see Sen and Janicon came in.
Uh-huh.
You want to put him in?
Yeah, he's got to get his video up a little bit more. You might see it better than me.
I can see him.
Okay,
we're going to add him to the stream. I also see African in Detroit. That's helpful. But African in Detroit, we would love to see you on camera.
Yes, you have to be on camera in order to get on.
Please do.
Yeah. So
by the way, if you can't use your camera and we know who you are, maybe we'll let you in. But you have to let us know that we know who you are, right? We know San and Genicon. He's actually a full member of the Shrine of Baha'i. So he's part of the family. We know who he is. So, you want to ask your question or make your comment, San and Genicon?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Oh, Uncle Ma'at to you all guys.
Uncle Ma'at.
My question is, I mean, I have like multiple questions, but I'm just gonna ask my first one first.
Yes.
People always say that Kemet, or what they call Proto-Kemet, was influenced by the Venka civilization, and they think that's why they're saying that Egypt, like what they call Egypt, would not be as great as it is because they didn't have the intelligence to develop metals. And they said when they look on the south, they don't see anything that looks like Kemet, like architecture, what they call the Cyclopean architecture. They don't see anything on the south that would say that those people, they come from the south to the north.
So what? I'm not sure if I understand your question, though.
My question is like, what would you say about that? Do you think Kemet were influenced by the Venka civilization? People from Europe, they migrate because of whatever wars, there was like persecution or whatever. They land into Kemet, and the people from Kemet, they were influenced by them because they have like a greater civilization that helped Kemet become what it is right now.
Let me say to you that I believe that with all that we're able to tell about early Kemet and Kemet from in its most important eras, I don't think that the argument that Kemet's influence comes from outside is one that is an argument that's supported by the data. I truly believe that if we look at things like the Cusco incense burner, I didn't even talk about Nabta Playa. I love talking about Nabta Playa, which is the stone calendar, the stone circle calendar that is in southern Kemet, that is in really what we would consider Nubia, very early. We actually should understand that great civilization actually occurred in Africa long before it occurred outside of Africa. And we don't see similar structures. We don't see similar structures in Europe of a similar age or older before we see them in Kemet. You know, I would simply say, if we believe that, I know that's not the argument you're making, but this is the argument that we hear. If we actually believe that Europeans or Westerners or folks from the North brought Kemet civilization to it, why don't we see that the predecessors of Kemet in architecture and archaeology in the Northern Europe? We don't see that. We don't see that. And so I think it's very clear that the civilization came from the south. We could use many arguments, including the fact that the Kemetic people told us they came from further into the interior.
That's right, they did.
They even said that they came from a land that today we render the name as Punt. And they continued to send expeditions to this land to see where they came from. And so we should understand that the civilization of Kemet comes from deeper into the interior of Africa and flourishes on the coast. Now, I'm not saying that the earlier African civilizations were as powerful or as wealthy as Kemet. I don't think that we can argue they were. But we should say that those civilizations that had their origin in the south truly flourished when they got to the coast. That's the way that I think we can argue it. For several reasons. There were lots of reasons why Kemet became an extremely powerful nation. And one of the reasons why it becomes so powerful is because it has the antiquity of Africa, but then it's able to do trade and exploration outside of Africa. And being that gateway also makes it a very powerful nation as well. So there are lots of reasons that we should say that it is Africans that create this civilization. I could spend like 4 hours giving you arguments. One of the other arguments I'm gonna just highlight here really quickly, and then we'll move on. One of the other things that we need to understand is one of perhaps the most important architectural features of ancient Kemet is what we would call the Merkut or the Mer, or what the Greeks called the pyramid in Kemet, right? Right?
Yes.
This is probably the most known architectural feature of ancient Kemet. And people have said that aliens must have done them, that Europeans did them, that Asians did them. I'm going to say to you that we see the intermediate forms that lead to the true Mer or Merkut form. We see that. So we know that that structure developed on the soil of Kemet itself, not elsewhere, because if it developed elsewhere, it would have come to Kemet already in its final form. We wouldn't see the intermediate stages until they reach to it. So I just want us to recognize that all of the data says that civilization comes from the south, and that Kemet doesn't receive major influence from civilizations that were outside of the continent of Africa.
You know, I also wanted to add a little layer to what you said. There is modern DNA evidence that corroborates what our ancient Kemetic ancestors said in terms of who their ancestors were. It lines up exactly. So, you know, there's the proof is not just in what our ancestors said. There's modern day proof to corroborate these migrations from what we would say south to north and from east to west. So, you know, I don't know how interested you are or whomever asked the question to do that kind of research as well. But the deeper we dig, the blacker it gets. The evidence.
And I think one of the reasons why Boots Shot we haven't seen a lot of compelling DNA research yet, a lot of it, but there are some, is because the folks that have control of the bodies don't want us to do it. So, for example, sometimes what we have to do is we have to wait for them to make mistakes with regard to DNA. And you know what? Who made a mistake? The person who was in charge of antiquities for Kemet for decades was a man named Zahi Hawass. And he's the one that put a DNA lab in the basement of the Cairo Museum. Most people don't know that there is a DNA lab there, but they did DNA analysis on Ramses III. On Ramses III. And they didn't give much information. In the footnotes of one of the papers, it gives you his haplogroup. And the haplogroup is a haplogroup that is only found in about 9% of men in modern Kemet, but it is found in about 85% of men in sub-Saharan Kemet.
85%.
That is where, now we had to wait for them to make a mistake to be able to tell that argument. We had to wait for them to make a mistake. Zahi Hawass is not trying to make the argument for the Africanity of the ancient Kemetic people. we are going to have to do much more research and have access to those royal bodies in order to truly tell the story.
So there's this documentary called The Journey of Man by Spencer Wells. He's a European Tamahu, and that documentary shows the migration of the Y chromosome. And basically what he's saying is, where a man is journeying, he's got his woman by his side. And so the documentary just shows the age of the Y chromosome as it kind of migrates around the world and mutates, and he proves age. It's a very easy to understand documentary, and it's called The Journey of Man. To answer, someone asked a question, why does he always get spammed with DNA arguments? I don't see the question in front of me. It's not that there isn't DNA evidence or genetic evidence, but the point that Jabari is making is that we are not in control of the bodies that have the evidence, which is the DNA, to prove even more, but also literally who these people were. We don't have access to that. He was saying that dude done messed up and did something right and gave us some proof. So until we have more access, or until scientists of other racial backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds and different mentalities, because it's really a mentality, are more honest about what they have and what it means and the proof that we already have, then it's just going to be slower than some of the other developments that are easier to make because we have access to them.
Yeah. I think that's a really good argument. And that's the challenge we have. There are DNA studies that give us this, that tell us this story, but they're few and far between. I'm going to tell you that I almost don't blame the people that are in control of Kemet now for not wanting folks to be able to tell the story of the African nature of ancient Kemet. Because you know why? I've been to Ethiopia, for example. Ethiopia has a wonderful, powerful civilization. A wonderful, powerful civilization that does amazing things, amazing architecture, a great civilization, a nation that was not conquered by colonizers. But you know what? When you go to see the antiquities in Ethiopia, ain't nobody there. If the modern rulers of Egypt, of Kemet, acknowledge that Kemet was Black, I would argue that a lot of their tourism dollars, which actually drives 85% of their funding for their entire nation, would dry up like this. I mean, how many of you have been able to travel to Kemet? That's a very small number. Imagine what would happen. So I almost don't even blame them. I see their game. I peep the game and I recognize it. I don't even blame them. We have to do the work. I'm not blaming them for what they haven't done. We have to do it because it is incumbent upon us to tell the story about our ancestors. Okay. I think I see a few more folks, right?
Jump to Anthony. Anthony, can you put your camera on, please?
Yeah, I saw him for a second. We know who he is, so obviously there he is.
I don't know who he is.
Yeah, that's St. Anthony. He's a member of the shrine. Stop it.
Oh, I didn't see his. Listen, you know I have internet issues. Okay? You gonna call me out in front of Tuesday Talk people. Okay.
St. Anthony, how you doing?
Okay, my family. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
So, Brother Jabari, I'm still blown away by last night's discussion.
Really?
About Hatshepsut.
Yes.
And the tomb. Now, we went over that during initiation, but it really sunk in last night. And so I'm wondering, are there any other tombs that are significant as that tomb in terms of defining us as Kemetic people, or is that tomb a standalone entity?
I'm going to say to you, St. Anthony, that you're talking about the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, known as Djeser. Today, the Arabs call it Deir el-Bahri. They say that her mortuary temple is a place called Deir el-Bahri. For those of you who aren't privy to the conversation that we had in class last night with St. Anthony. But you should know that That is one of the most important spaces that you can go to in Kemet. But there are a bunch of other tombs. There's so many of them. Some of them, San Anthony, that I haven't even been to yet. I've studied them for decades. I haven't even been in them yet. But there are so many antiquities that you can have access to in Kemet that tell the story of how Africans gave civilization to the world. We see temples that have devices that doctors and medical workers used long before there were doctors in other parts of the world. We see the image of the divine birth of a sacred birth of rulers, things that we see later in other spiritual traditions in tombs. We see the description of the different groups of people that Kemetic people had access to in a tomb. For example, the tomb of Seti I. We see those in tombs. We even see the earliest depiction of martial arts in a tomb. There are so many places to go to in Kemet that tell the story of how Africans gave civilization to the world. And the challenge that we have is that we are now becoming interested and powerful enough to go look for our image in the ancient world. This period that we are in now, maybe it started in the 1980s to the period that we're in right now. We're now really beginning to look for ourselves after that horrible, that most evil period that some now call the Ma'afa, the period of our enslavement and its aftermath. We're just getting to the point where we can undo what happened to us. It's going to be so important for us to continue to do this work, St. Anthony, so that we're able to bring the rest of our family into those distant places in the world that show us who we are, that refute the things that we've been told about ourselves. And so I'm excited about them. We haven't even talked about Beni Hassan yet, St. Anthony. I can't wait to talk to you about Beni Hassan. The things that we about ourselves. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. So yeah, there are other places, and I'm glad that you were excited by that. I really am. I really am. Well, by the way, you should know that St. Anthony is referring to St. Anthony's in the 3 Millennia of Excellence class. By the way, Nasut Shu, I'm going to mute you for a second because I think I hear an echo coming from you.
Can I say something? Can I give a shameless plug on the 3 Millennia of Excellence class? I took that class years ago when I was still in a fog after losing my father. And even not being able to think straight, what you learn is amazing. Family, one of the reasons why we have this 4-part on Kemetic history in the Golden Era is to give you 4 legs to stand on like a table. There's no way that you can get all of it in Tuesday Talk. Okay. And if you hang around Jabari, he might talk about like an ink pen for 5 hours because he saw it, he's read it. Dr. Ben showed him the original pen. So, so what you want to get out of this is this is your structure. You've got your details in each class or in each part 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you continue to do your own work and research. Okay. The 3 Millennia of Excellence class is absolutely amazing. I want to take it again. When Jabari gives a class, you're going to get your structure. Same thing with Anika. And it's worth it to take the class, have your notes, and to study them. Even if you just study the notes and you don't read. I'm not saying don't read, but I'm saying sometimes there's so much information. If you master the notes and then you read, it'll make the reading easier to absorb because there's a lot of it. But I'll also say this is one thing, and I'm going to turn the mic back over to Jabari. Once you get the foundation on some stuff, like the foundation on Kemetic history, the foundation on West African history, and I'm broad brushing lots of information, but just lay it down a layer at a time, foundationally at a time, and then over time, it just doesn't seem as overwhelming. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. And I just wanted to really quickly, before we move to another question, show you the space that St. Anthony, I should have done that in the beginning, is referring to. This is the space that was built by Queen Hatshepsut. I argue that she is still the most powerful ruler the most powerful female ruler in all of human history. And when you look at this magnificent structure that she built, first of all, know that it wasn't built block by block. It was carved out of the mountain. That off the rip should just blow your mind. Africans practice what I have called in my book negative architecture. And it was one of the things that Africans had excellence in the ancient world. So when you look at this amazing structure, you should know, I also argue that this is the predecessor of what the Greeks call the Parthenon, which is later what is where they get the Lincoln Memorial from. You'll see here the depiction of the Africans in the interior that had sent her expedition to meet. You'll see the king and queen of Punt there. I mean, this is a powerful space, and I have had the blessing to be able to see this space with my own eyes over the course of the last 20 years. If you can, you should journey to it. It is amazing. It is amazing.
Ashe.
Yeah.
I have a.
Go ahead.
Yes, I just have to add something, and my questions will come after. I was very happy when Ntepi Jabari mentioned the word placenta. I have to tell you that I'm taking like a Medinator class, but it's in French, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
I should say it's kind of like easier for me to understand. And the methodology is probably for me easier for me to understand. I mean, for my culture and language background, I should say. When you mentioned, I was doing something about number 4 and food in English. Like when they, I just made like a PowerPoint on number 4 and food, the word for and food in English related to the placenta. When you say the word placenta, linking it to the 4 elements. I don't know. There's like some type of background noise. I don't know if it's coming from me. Linking it to the 4 elements, like we know, fire, water, earth, and etc. So I was thinking, our ancestors built all these things, all those greatness, like the picture you're showing right now. And this place is taken over by intruders, assassin, murderers, you call it, and they stole the place. The only reason all these things still exist, I think you mentioned it, it's because of tourism. They're making a lot of money out of it. That's the only reason why we can go and visit those places still. What I'm saying is
Jabari, mute your shared screen because you're up there twice. So just mute one of yourselves.
I don't see myself twice. Oh, I see. No, one of them is a shared. There should be no sound from the shared screen.
Oh, okay. My bad.
I'll stop sharing. Go ahead. I'll stop sharing. Let's see if that.
Yes. Nope. My question is, we trying to look in Kemet, what they call Egypt right now, the trace of our ancestor greatness, which can be, I should say, modified or destroyed by those people living there right now. Because because you said it before, the only reason why we can go over there and visit those places is because they're making money out of those things and with us. Is there any other way that we can uplift our ancestors' greatness and spirituality and everything that then invaded that will benefit us, because everything that we're doing right now seems to benefit the intruders, those people who stole the lands. And that's my question. I think Jabari is muted.
Sorry, I muted myself because Abutsa Shot said there might have been an echo. So, and I was talking and just yapping and with a mute. The question you're asking is a complex question, right? And I think that it's going to take decades for us to get to the point where we can assert ourselves in the sacred spaces of ancient Africa, and also in those spaces of Africa that tell the archaeological story of who the African is. It's going to be a long time till we're ready. And I think that part of what we could do today is support archaeological exercises like the one that our brother Anthony Browder is involved in. Anthony Browder, you may know, is working with a Russian PhD to actually put together an amazing site that's really just a little way away from Hatshepsut's temple. It's not far from it at all. It's in that area. And it is the archaeological work on 3 of the tombs that are of the Cushitic people who came forward during the 25th dynasty to put Kemet back together. And some of the things that he's found are amazing. So I think that that's part of what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to pay. We're going to have to pay. We're going to have to pay to do our own research. And we're going to have to also support young scholars who are going to get the degree necessary for them to be able to do primary research. As much study as I have done, my degrees do not allow me, for example, to take on a Kemetic site myself. I would have to have a degree in archaeology or Egyptology to do that. We have to support young scholars who are going to have to go into the lion's den, into the teeth, and fight for the argument that Africans gave civilization to the world. And that's going to be a really difficult thing to do.
It's going to be a brawl. It's going to be a knockdown, drag out.
And we're going to have to do it slowly to some degree too, because one of the things that's going to happen, those same people that have control of those sites, they are not going to want us to make those arguments. They're just not going to want us to make them because it's going to affect their pocket. So, you know, that's going to be a real challenge that we have. It's going to be a real challenge that we have. Maybe it's good that they make lots of money on people going there. Because if they didn't make lots of money on people going there, maybe there'd be lots of people there that have no interest in protecting those antiquities. You know, that's the reality. For them, it might be the bottom line, but the reality is if there was no bottom line, more would be destroyed. So this is a really curious time that we're in as we come up out of our great Ma'afa and try to once again move towards the front of human civilization. It's going to take some time. Now I know Abutsa Shot that that Nasut Shu has been for a while. Can we go to his question as well?
Absolutely. I was going to mention that was what I was getting ready to say.
Yeah.
Nasut Shu, you're up.
And Dwa to send Anthony and send Angenicon for their great questions.
Yes. And send Anthony, look, my whole computer is janky and Jabari knows that. And so my bad. I'm fixing it. It's gonna be listen, y'all, Tuesday Talk followers. My internet is about to be lightning fast and I'm getting a new device. So it's gonna be on and popping.
Well, really quickly, let me just say, you should know, folks, it takes resources to do this work. You know, and it's not always easy to do it. Anyway, we're gonna continue that conversation later. Nasut Shu, welcome, brother. You're muted. I muted you, actually. I think I might be able to unmute you.
Hello?
There you go. We can hear you now.
All right. What's going on, Jabari? How's everybody doing? Hotep.
I'm good, brother. Hotep.
My question to you, Jabari, is in fact some of the things that we read in the Bible or we see in the Bible, the Old Testament, to be exact, is the Hebrew Israelites trying to justify themselves conquering African kingdoms and lands.
Wait, what?
I think that what he's asking is about how people have weaponized some of the stories of the Bible and have tried to justify some things that have occurred. I do believe that folks have taken some of the stories of the Bible, and I'm going to say mostly stories that we have no archaeological evidence for. By the way, what am I really saying? Stories that we should know are mythological now. And they have tried to use the Bible to justify things that have occurred. And yeah, I tend to sometimes have challenges with some of the things that the Hebrew Israelite community does. If you followed me, you know that I've had lots of tussles with folks in that community. Not all of them. I have lots of contacts of folks, particularly on the continent of Africa, like in Ghana, of Hebrew Israelites that are doing great work. But I often have to argue with folks who are trying to argue, one, that we are not Africans, two, that Africans are cursed, and three, that we should disconnect ourselves from the continent of Africa. So whenever people say that, I'm going to have lots of things to argue with them about. And one of the things that the Hebrew Israelites do sometimes is they celebrate the murder of African children. That's what in some ways you could argue that's what the Passover is, right?
Yes, yes.
Celebrate the murder of African children. And that's another reason why I tend to have disagreements with them. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a whole lot of work to do. Hopefully we'll get there soon. I think I also see a question on the screen from Tehuti Forever. The Remech followed. By the way, Remech is one of the proper names of the people of Kemet. The Remech. The Remech followed the Hapi north, coming from the interior of Africa. How far north did they control? What was the limit of the Kemetic Empire? Good question. And I'm going to say to you, I don't even know if we have a definitive answer yet. I want you to know that it is believed that the Kemetic people might have made journeys as far as what is modern day France, maybe even as far as modern day Germany. There are artifacts that have been found there that seem to argue that they went as far as those places. But I'm going to say to you that there were groups of people all over the Mediterranean that were beholden to the Kemetic people for a long period of history. Now, remember, the Kemetic Empire lasted for 3,000 years, so those borders aren't always the same, right? The areas that they had control over are not always the same, but I just find it fascinating to see how far and wide Kemetic influence is. Here's an example. I really enjoy reading sometimes. I'm not going to pull the book now. It would take too much time. I enjoy reading sometimes from what are known as the Amarna letters. And in the Amarna letters is a letter that comes from the prince of a city further north from Israel, modern Israel, by the way, called Tyre. And he writes a letter to Akhenaten. What does he say? He says, I am the dirt beneath your sandals. When you breathe, I breathe. You are the sun that allows me to exist. What is he doing? He's actually acknowledging just how powerful the Kemetic Empire was. So powerful that he sends a gushing letter to say, thank you for allowing me to exist. We see these kinds of artifacts that exist throughout the history of Kemetic influence. And we should know that it is one of the most influential nations in the world. And I'm just talking about what their state power did. I'm not going to even talk about how the ideas of Kemet have been subsumed in the major spiritual traditions that people follow today. And Kemet and Africa has gotten no credit for all that it has given the spiritual individuals, the people in Kemet today. So I think that we need to recognize that and acknowledge it. And Ramses the Great did have great battles. His greatest battle is in a place in the Levant known as Kadesh. But definitely, we know that the Kemetic people went far and wide and had lots of influence. Not far afield as well. It looks like Sue, you wanted to ask a little bit more?
You can take your mic off.
Go ahead.
I muted you.
Yes,
so
Jabari. Yes, Jabari. Now, Tyre, this place Tyre that you speak of, isn't Tyre the first area that Alexander the Greek, not the Great, the Greek, first conquered and took over?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Yes. I think that we need to know a lot more about the contours of the ancient world, and it's really important for us to really get a sense of just how far and wide African influence went. All you need to do, folks, we don't have the time to do it now, but I want you to look for the letter from Abi Milki, the Prince of Tyre, to Akhenaten. If you don't remember the name of the ruler, fine. Just look up Tyre, Tyre, Amarna letter Akhenaten, and you'll be able to read the letter yourself. Some of these things that you can look for are things that scholars have known for decades, but the average folks don't have access to. And so we should be more familiar with just how influential the African people were. And I see that Ty 313 mentioned the statuette of Asar from 7 BCE in Zaire. I have actually heard that. I'm waiting to hear more about what was found, see images of what was found, so that I'm able to track that one down. I have heard that. If you have more information on it, I would love for you to email it to me, because I've done some searches. Unfortunately, all I've found is documents in French. I don't speak French.
Jenicon, you got some work.
And Jenicon might be helpful here, right?
Yes. I'm sorry. Abu Tisha,
yeah.
You don't know. We talk about you all the time. We have a Shemshu Heru brothers. Like we gather every week on Facebook Talk, and we talk about Abu Tisha, how devoted she is, and how quick she is, and to answer questions and help us out, especially during initiation period. If you feel like you biting your tongues all the time, it's because of us.
That's very sweet. You hear what they say to Boots a shot.
Wait, what'd you say, Barry?
If she was lighter, she'd be blushing, but she got too much melanin for you to see the blushing right now.
Well, I want to say thank you for that. I appreciate that. I really love being a priestess, and I was friends with Anika and Jabari before I became a priestess, and so, but I've definitely been guided by Anika and Jabari to make sure that I say the right things, and I'm glad for it. So no, I'm not biting my tongue. I just want to make sure I give you guys everything you need in a way that you can absorb it, and that it becomes a part of what you do.
Right.
When I was initiating, my dad had died 2 years prior. My aunt had died 2 years prior to that, and my cousin had died a year prior to that. So I just had like a lot of years of just crying and can't think straight, don't remember stuff or whatever. So some parts of initiation for me were a bit overwhelming because your girl couldn't think. I was like, I gotta get my brain back. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands, what's going on, and to understand that it's definitely a lifestyle of learning and being dedicated to it. So yeah, and I like my questions answered. You see my question, answer my question. So that's how I feel like I need to answer your questions when you guys ask questions. And same thing in the chat. My response in the chat is a little slow again because of the jankiness, which is coming to an end. I should have a countdown for when I get a better device, because I've been working on it, blah blah blah. Anyway, but thank you so much for that, and just say thank you to the guys who get together and
yes
mention me a few times. I appreciate it.
All the time. We mention your name all all the time how devoted you are, and we try to gather like every week, have like some Facebook chat. Like sometimes we still like for 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours discussing about like the shrine.
I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
That is so
Yes.
awesome.
That's
Thank you
wonderful.
so much.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
have time
So,
for a few more questions. It's getting late now, isn't it? It's getting late.
yeah. I mean, I was just gonna ask Brother Jabari. I'm so hooked into that focus elsewhere. I mean, I think I've read somewhere that Kemet had a soldier that around what is called right now Russia. Um, at the border of Russia, Kemet had soldiers there too. I think I've read somewhere.
I absolutely read that. You
Yes.
should know that I don't promote anything until I can run it down and prove it. But
Yes.
yes, I
I
have
agree.
also heard that there have been artifacts at the border of Russia that seem to prove that there were Kemetic contacts there.
Yes.
But I'm not gonna. I need to run it down. I'm gonna say to you folks, I don't know if I'd be absolutely stunned to see that, but I want to be able to show the proof. The ancient Kemetic people ran one of the most influential nations at the time when other nations were just getting out of bed. And so you have to understand that their influence was far and wide. We need to do more work to be able to prove it. And I see Natron Means. I think I know that name, but I'm not sure who that is. He mentions the Colchians, and I'm sure he's referring to the comment by Herodotus that says that the Colchians say that they were part of the Kemetic army. They settled in a particular place and they remained there. So there are I think you'd be surprised how influential Kemet was in terms of its expeditions, but I think we should also recognize that the very concepts of, for example, resurrection, the concepts of a divine birth, the concepts of a deity that dies for our sins.
That's right. All of that.
That dies for us in order to get into heaven. I'm not going to say sins because that's not quite the way that the Kemetic people would have rendered it. All of those things come from the traditions of ancient Africa. So I think that we would be absolutely stunned to see. By the way, I am chomping at the bit to have another debate on these topics. And some of you know that hopefully the debate that we'll have with Garfield Reed will go forward. We'll see. If he's able to be respectful, it will. But some of these arguments we'll make in a public forum so folks are able to see it and understand it very clearly as well.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Jenica.
Yes, I mentioned earlier that the word "for" and "food" in the Kemetic language, like why the English says "for," and in what we call the Medunator, the way to say "for" is "fedu." Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
It's "fedu." So, and we see that word like spread all over Africa. That when I said like I was hooked into that, why don't we look elsewhere to go with the Kemetic legacy and make that thing what we're trying to, because we have enough evidence right now. We get like you said, there's a lot to discover in Kemet, there's a lot to discover in Egypt, but we have a lot of evidence right now in library that we can continue with the legacy of Kemet right now. Why can't we go on the sub-Saharan region, West Africa, Ghana, etc., and see what's there that looks like Kemet and makes it benefit us instead of like giving money to those people. I hate to say that. I hate those like those people. They're like getting our money.
Now, I'm going to say to you at this point, Senator Genicon, there is no other. We're going to have to go to Kemet, even though we're not the ones that are benefiting from it financially, because that's where the artifacts are. But we shouldn't just go to Kemet. I think that's what you're really saying. We should be traveling further and farther on the continent.
Yes.
And looking for our image in antiquity and in the modern world elsewhere. And so that is important. We're going to have to continue to go to Kemet, even though we're not in control of it, but it shouldn't stay there. It shouldn't stop there. You know, I'm just back. We've been back for
a week.
It hasn't been a week, but it's been a little bit of time. It's been a longer, maybe 3 weeks. Anyway, we traveled to Kemet and to Ghana. And I'm going to say to you, I love traveling in Kemet, but I absolutely would love to spend months at a time in Ghana. We have to get to the point where we are reconnecting these great narratives. And as we go to Kemet and Ghana, we're going to also recognize when we go in West Africa that there are places where our people have argued that they are connected to Kemet. I want you to take a look at this image. This is actually an image of a statue that is now in the city of Mori. It's the city that I've been installed in, and it is of a person that, let me see if I can make it a little larger. It is of a folkloric character in ancient in Ghana that supposedly they say that he and his brother traveled from Kemet to establish their civilization of the Fanti in Ghana. That's what they say. So this is a statue of Alfarni Kwegwa. And they say he and his brother traveled from Kemet to establish their village, their city, the city of Mori in the the Cape Coast area of Ghana. And he was supposedly the one that taught them how to be great fishermen. So the city is a fisherman's village. And so they put up a statue to him. This is new. It hasn't been there that long. When I heard they were doing it, Anika and I made donations for them to be able to do the statue. But this is the way that they connect themselves to Kemet. I'm going to tell you that if you just approach a Fanti child in Ghana on the street, and you ask them where they came from, that child will say, well, our people came from Kemet. It's in their descriptions of who they are.
That's right.
So,
and that documentary that I mentioned with the Journey of Man shows that type of migration. The information is out there that overlays with what we're discussing here tonight.
We're going to have to do a lot of work to continue to tell this story in irrefutable fashion. There's much more work to do, family. Hopefully, groups of folks like the ones that are part of this discussion will actually continue this work.
Do we have time for one more question that's quick?
Sure. A quick question we might be able to ask. I think I also see maybe there were more in the chat. That's also possible. I think I see Nasut Shu raising his hand as well.
Okay. Let's see if anybody wants to jump on. Nasut, you got it. And then one question.
Jabari,
yes.
I'm not for sure. I think a couple of weeks ago I read somewhere that they discovered that the Nigerian language, I'm not for sure which language, but they linked the language back to Kemet. They said that some of the language, 65% of the language was similar, or not even just similar, but linked back to Kemet. I'm not sure if you heard that or read that, but I've just read that maybe a couple weeks ago.
I have been hearing a lot about the languages of West Africa and the cognates, the sort of remnants of the Kemetic language that are there. The first person that I'm aware of that did that kind of work was Sheikh Anta Diop himself, when he looked at similarities in Wolof to the Kemetic language. And I'm going to just say to you that I think that the more work and research we do, the more we're going to find this. One of our dear brothers who was a young scholar, Asar Imhotep, has done a lot of great work on this topic. I believe he's also been on Tuesday Talk. I honestly believe that there are scholars who are telling this story. They need to be supported. Because I'm going to tell you, as a scholar myself, this is not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do. How do you support yourself when you're reading a book? You know what I mean? You know, so it's a challenging thing to do. So we have to support those scholars who are trying to tell the story of how Africa gave civilization to the world. Tell the story of exactly what ancient Africa looked like. Who were the people that created these great civilizations? What did they do? How did they do it? We're going to have to work to make sure that those stories are told and that fundamental scholarship is completed.
I have to say, like, one of my professors said, if a pharaoh is resurrected from the dead right now and walk in the region of the sub-Saharan region, they would understand clearly what they're saying.
Oh, wow.
Yes, they would understand clearly what they're saying. They will, I mean, one of them, they'll probably even correct them the way they talk, because it's so similar how they speak compared to the ancient Kemetic language.
I think that there are a number of scholars that are making that argument. I want to see them do more research, because I'm seeing remnants, I'm seeing portions of research. The research is ongoing. And there are those sections of the Kemetic language that are in other languages. I mean, and I think that we need to recognize it, and we need to be able to continue to tell this story in an irrefutable fashion. Now, I'm going to say this to you, Sen and Genicon. We need to also take advantage of modern technology. Do you know one of the things that we should be doing is building an AI system to analyze these languages at a minute form and show the similarities? It would be very easy to do that now. But you have knowledge of both languages and also the ability to funnel that knowledge through supercomputers today. And I think that as that story gets told, it will become clearer and clearer based on the linguistics, where the Kemetic people came from and where they went to. Because some of those folks in sub-Saharan Africa, Sen and Genicon, they aren't speaking similar to the Kemetic language because that's where the Kemetic people went to. They're speaking similar because that's where they came from. Those languages are older. And we're going to need to be able to tell that story. We're going to need to be able to tell that story in irrefutable form. Yeah.
Jabari, we also have a request to visit West Africa and Cape Verde.
Listen, I'm telling you, I can't wait to. I want to set my foot on every piece of soil and sand
I do
that is on the African continent.
I know that's right.
I would love to come to Cape Verde. One of the things you should do, invite us. Invite us. Right?
This person did, I think. This is the second comment. It says
I'm not something written there. I'm saying tell us where we should go, how we should go, who we should speak to. Help us get to those places and we'll go.
That's right. That's right. DM us on Facebook and we'll respond.
You should know that there was a point where all we had done is travel to Kemet. And slowly we began to travel to other places. There are so many other places we need to get to. I have still not been to Nigeria. I need to go to Nigeria, the most populous nation on the African continent. I need to go to Nigeria. It is a need, not a want, a need.
A necessity.
But I need to be able to have better contacts there so that I know who to trust, who to travel with, who's going to be able to really be able to give us an authentic Nigerian connection. And so I am really, really waiting to be able to do that. You know, and as much as we travel, you should know I travel to Kemet every year, but Anika and I are building a house in Ghana. So we really do intend to spend more time on the continent, in the places where quote unquote sub-Saharan Africans live today. That's where we're going, and I'm excited to do it.
Well, I don't see two African Renaissance TV. Anka Ma'at just came on. I just want to say this has been a very powerful conversation and an amazing first Tuesday talk back for the season. So I want to thank you all for participating, like you always do. If you have any questions that come up after this, you can always DM us on Facebook Messenger, and on our Facebook page, Trying My Eye. I'll see it. Jabari will see it. Anika will see it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
please do. And really quickly, Boots a shot, because I know you're closing. I see DZ Onk say, man, y'all living, Brother Jabari. I wish I could go to the continent. Well, let me say to you, you can go to the continent.
You can go.
You can go. Now, well, all you have to do is hatch a plan. Where do you want to go? How much does it cost? How can you get there? Are there ways that you can go at smaller amounts of money? Are there ways you can go for free? How would you do it? Who do you need to know? Hatch a plan, okay? Because the only way that you're going to get it done is if you begin to plan to do it. For there was my study where I only studied Africa. I had never been there. And now I can say that I have traveled to Africa more than 24 times. And that didn't happen by mistake, right? You can travel to the continent and you will be welcomed on the continent. And once you get there, it's going to get in your blood and you're going to keep going and keep going and keep going. When I leave Ghana, I'm sad. Because I know what I really want to do is just sleep and eat and sit by the ocean and talk to people. And I'm telling you that once you start traveling, you're going to want to figure out how you're going to continue to travel. And then you have to get to the point where you have to figure out commerce that involves both continental Africa and diaspora Africa, because we will empower, enrich, and enjoy ourselves if we reconnect to the continent. And I see Natron.
Ashe.
Jabari, should we get rid of the racist trope sub-Saharan from our lexicon? Yeah, I only use it now because it's what Western scholars use. I actually believe that it is kind of ridiculous. It's one of the ways they used to say Black Africa. Nobody says white Europe.
White Europe or Asian China.
No one says that. So yeah, it is a racist term. Maybe racist is strong. It's a xenophobic term. It's a term that connects, that looks at the world from the perspective of someone else. But I do want to say that when we go beyond beneath the Sahara, that's when we see the people that we would consider the blackest people in the world. And those same people are the people that gave civilization to the world. And we should recognize that. And I know you don't like it. I get it. I agree with you. I get it. I really do get it. Yeah. So I'm sorry. I just busted in when you were trying to conclude because I saw something important in the chat. But
that's okay.
I just want to say too, and I don't get why the place where the first placenta was buried is not the holy place. If the first placenta of the humanity was buried at that place should be holy. And I'm calling it the holy place, the holy ground.
Well, I'm gonna just say to you, you should know that there's a place in Kemet that was known as Takensit, placenta land. That's what you were seeing on the Palette of Namur. It's one of the states of Kemet. So they viewed it the same way you did, dear brother. By the way, if you believe the placenta is sacred, you also have a very particular perspective on the divine feminine, one that we're not going to see in the European world. That is African.
Yes.
That is African, to recognize that our divine counterparts, the divine feminine, is also divine, and it's not just a masculine entity. This is a really important philosophy that needs to come back into the world.
And I think this is how our ancestors view the temple as well. They view the temple as the placenta, the sacred feminine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, folks,
I just want there's one comment that I want to address. There was one. I have to finish. And it says, Dillinger Ronan said that's because Africa is more diverse than those other continents. There's nothing wrong with the term sub-Saharan. Now, the term sub-Saharan is not giving us a reference to a part of Africa or, the diversity of Africa. It's an insult saying that the only real Africans are below the Sahara, and the people above the Sahara, which would include Egypt and Ethiopia, are not Africans and never were African. And that's the civilized part of Africa. It is very racist. It's very derogatory. It's not a regional, it's not anything that has to do with directions or region.
I think that we have to recognize that it is a geographic definition, but it has been weaponized. That's all we should say. It's been weaponized.
Wasn't it always used to, wasn't that the purpose for it always was to be insulting? Is that not correct?
I think that it's a little bit more complex than that. I think that we have to recognize that Africa beneath the Sahara does look different than Africa above the Sahara. There's some, especially today, if you go to a place like Libya, it looks radically different than a place like Nigeria. So I'm not saying that that Africa isn't above the Sahara, but they're trying to articulate something that actually exists. Are they giving it too much emphasis? Yes. Why are they giving it too much emphasis? Is it because they're racist? Yes. but there is something that we're trying to articulate that I think that we need to be attuned to. And
so Dillinger said nobody's saying North Africans are not Africans. You said that, meaning I said that. No, I'm not the one that said that. Jabari, let me finish this.
Yeah.
Jabari just explained that there are people who say this. This isn't something I made up today on Tuesday Talk. This is what that means in this context.
There are people who live in North Africa who would say they're not African. Sure, absolutely. There are. I'm not saying it's the majority of people. I'm not trying to give you a value judgment in terms of how that goes. But there is something that has occurred that is different in some instances. I travel to Kemet every year. The people that live in Kemet, for the most part, don't look like the rest of Africa. That's part of what people are trying to articulate. And Dillinger Ronan says those people are idiots. Stop catering to them. We're not disagreeing with you. I'm saying there's some complexity that we need to be able to try to articulate. And
he said I said it. I'm disagreeing with that. That's not a fact. It's been
but I don't. Did he say that you said it? Or
yes, he said. I'm gonna go up here and tell you what he said.
Okay.
He said. Oh, come on, scroll up. Come on, scroll. Nobody is saying North Africans are not Africans.
Yeah, but I don't know.
You said that.
Is that you?
Sorry, wait. He said nobody is saying North Africans are not Africans. You said that, meaning I said that. No, it's something that's been said. And then while I was reading that, you clarified that it is something that's been said.
All I'm saying is that sometimes when you're reading a chat, you don't get all of the meaning because you know what I mean. So
he used an absolute. So I'm not going to clean up his comment, Jabari. He said nobody, and then he said you said it, but you clarified it. And I think as the comments continued, that he modified his statement a little bit. But I'm not going to clean up those two statements. They're right there.
Yeah. But I honestly don't think that you all are trying to say. I think that we're struggling to say the same thing, and I think that Dillinger Dillinger, you're trying to say the same thing that we're saying as well. This is not necessarily an easy thing to wrap language around, and we ought to get better at it. That's all I'm saying. We gotta
no, Dillinger. I'm not.
Let's not. We're not.
No, wait. I want to clarify. I'm not saying that. I'm repeating what other folks have said. Those aren't my sentiments or my words. This is your. I don't know if you're getting it. I'm not. That these aren't my words. This is the sentiment that's behind the term sub-Saharan.
I don't think that. I think at 11:08 we shouldn't go into a chat disagreement. I just think that we need to let.
But I think it's important to make it very clear that I'm not sitting here making a distinction.
It's clear
between that.
It's clear. It's clear. Okay. It's clear. I don't think we should go back and forth. It's clear. And reading the whole context of what he's saying, I don't think that you're saying something radically different than what we're saying. There are some challenges with trying to describe this, and that's what we're trying to say. So let's be there and move from there. Okay.
Oh, we're done with that topic. It's been cleared up.
All right, folks.
So, oh my goodness. So we were like, we're not going to be on that long. We're always on long. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on for Tuesday Talk.
Thank you.
I was doing a little work over the summertime, and we have a really great lineup for this season of Tuesday Talk. So the time is going to be 7 p.m. Jabari has other engagement, so that's the other 3 sessions with Jabari on the Golden Age of Kemet. Those times will vary, but all of the overwhelming majority of the rest of the Tuesday Talks will be at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, when you want to go back and study it, it's uploaded on our Facebook page, our YouTube page. We have a Kemetic Legacy Today page. And I have one, Healthy Lifestyles with Cy Singletary. You can look at it there as well. Okay. So it's really important, and it's awesome to just go back and take a look at it. You have about a month just to even familiarize yourself with what was said. So when we go into the next stage of the Golden Era, you have a better understanding of this one. Okay. Listen, guys, get a notebook and a pen. Being Kemetic is not just reading and studying. It's not that. Tuesday Talk is a platform to learn and to exchange ideas and to get better understanding and to find your place in this African spiritual, world that is really kind of growing. And we're contributing to that. And people in Tuesday Talk contribute to that. You're contributing to that. And so that's amazing. It's worth it to study this as scholarly stuff, scholarly information as it is, because I don't speak on stuff that I don't know about. Neither does Jabari. The people who we have lined up for the show, they learn it, they do it, they know it. Okay, so put your seatbelt on. Tuesday Talk is going to be amazing this year, and I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate your support.
Ashe.
Folks. We'll see you soon.
See you next Tuesday.
Peace, family.
Dua. Little family.
Akin ma'at.